The thunder of hooves echoed across the Montana plains as Hannah Winters clutched the crumpled telegram to her chest, her heart pounding with the terrible realization that she had made the gravest mistake of her life. It was 1879, and she was 22 years old, a mail-order bride who had traveled 2,000 miles from Boston to marry a man who had presented himself as a respectable rancher, but who she now knew was anything but honorable. Hannah peered through the dusty window of the stagecoach, her blue eyes wide with fear as the distant figures on horseback grew closer. 3 men, riding hard, gaining ground with each passing second. She recognized them from her brief and terrifying introduction to her new husband just hours before they were Jeremiah Blackstone's men, and they were coming for her. "Miss, you all right back there?" the driver called, glancing over his shoulder. "Please," Hannah begged, her voice shaking, "those men, they're after me. I need to get away." The driver cursed under his breath as he snapped the reins harder. "Hold tight. There's a trading post up ahead. Maybe we can." A gunshot cracked through the air. The driver jerked, then slumped forward. The horses, panicked by the sound and the sudden slack in the reins, veered sharply off the trail. Hannah screamed as the stagecoach tilted, then rolled, throwing her against the hard wooden frame before everything went black. When Hannah came to, she was being carried in strong arms. Her head throbbed, and she could feel something warm and sticky on her temple. She tried to struggle, thinking she'd been captured by Blackstone's men, but a gentle voice stopped her. "Easy now, miss. You're safe. I've got you." She forced her eyes open to see a man with a weathered face and kind hazel eyes looking down at her. A cowboy, his hat tipped back on his head, revealing dark hair streaked with dust from the trail. Who are you?" she managed, her throat dry. "Name's Hank Keller, madam. Found you in that overturned coach. Driver's dead, I'm afraid. Those men who were chasing you, they were still searching the area, so I got you out quick as I could." Hannah's memory flooded back with terrible clarity. "Blackstone," she whispered. "Jeremiah Blackstone. He said he was a rancher looking for a wife, but when I arrived..." She shuddered. "The women there, they warned me. He's not a rancher, he runs a brothel, and when I refused..." Tears welled in her eyes, Hank's jaw tightened. "Blackstone, yeah, I know of him, operates out of Pine Ridge. Bad business." He looked down at her with concern. "You're a mail-order bride," Hannah nodded weakly. "I was a seamstress in Boston. My parents died last winter and I had nowhere to go." His letters seemed so genuine. She closed her eyes in shame. "No need to explain, miss. Blackstone's fooled plenty before you." Hank adjusted his hold on her as they approached a small cabin nestled against the foothills. "This is my place. It ain't much, but you'll be safe here until we figure something out." The cabin was modest but clean, with a stone fireplace, a table with 2 chairs, and a small bed in the corner. Hank set Hannah down carefully on a chair and went to stoke the fire. In the flickering light, she could see he was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in practical cowboy attire, denim pants, a faded work shirt, leather vest, and worn boots. A gun belt hung at his hip. "Thank you," Hannah said, wincing as she touched the cut on her forehead. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." Hank brought her a damp cloth. "Here for your head, and don't thank me yet. Blackstone's men won't give up easy. He doesn't like losing what he considers his property." Hannah shivered at the word property. "What can I do?" "I have nowhere to go, no money. First thing is to get you rested up, then we'll figure the rest out." Hank moved to the window, peering out cautiously. "I don't think they followed us, but I'll keep watch tonight." As Hannah cleaned her wound, she studied Hank more carefully. He had the look of a man who had seen too much hardship, a scar along his jawline, calloused hands, and eyes that seemed older than his years, which she guessed to be about 30. "Are you a rancher?" she asked. Hank gave a small smile. "Used to be. Now I do odd jobs. Some cattle driving, some scouting for the army. Was headed to Pine Ridge when I came across your stagecoach." "Why were you going there?" A shadow crossed his face. "Personal business." Hannah sensed it was best not to press. She was, after all, a stranger to him, despite his kindness. As night fell, Hank insisted Hannah take the bed while he positioned himself in a chair by the door, rifle across his lap. "Get some sleep, Miss Winters. Tomorrow's likely to be a long day." Hannah wanted to protest, to say she couldn't take his bed, but exhaustion overwhelmed her. As she drifted off to sleep, She heard Hank softly humming a tune she didn't recognize, the sound oddly comforting in the darkness of this strange place. She woke with a start several hours later, heart racing from a nightmare where Blackstone's men had found her. The cabin was dark except for the dying embers in the fireplace. Hank was still at his post by the door, alert despite the late hour. "Bad dream?" he asked softly. Hannah nodded, sitting up. "I'm sorry if I disturbed you. No need to apologize, keeping watch anyway." He looked at her thoughtfully. "Mind if I ask what made you decide to become a mail-order bride? Seems a hard choice for a city woman." Hannah pulled the blanket around her shoulders. "My father was a tailor. I learned the trade from him, but after the fever took both my parents, I couldn't keep the shop. Too many debts." She stared into the glowing embers. "I saw an advertisement in the paper. Mr. Blackstone, or rather, the person pretending to be him in those letters, wrote of a beautiful ranch, of needing a wife to help make it a home. He sounded lonely, kind, I thought." Her voice broke. "You thought you could build a new life," Hank finished for her. "Nothing wrong with that. The wrong here is all Blackstone's." They fell silent for a moment before Hannah spoke again. "What about you? Have you always been in Montana?" Hank shook his head. "Born in Kentucky, came west after the war, seemed like a place where a man could start fresh. You fought in the war." "Union Army, was barely 18 when I enlisted, saw things no boy should see." He ran a hand over his face as if trying to wipe away the memories. "After, I couldn't go home, too many ghosts." Hannah understood that feeling all too well. "And did you find a fresh start?" Hank's expression softened slightly. "For a time, had a small ranch, a wife, then came the winter of '76. Martha took sick, pneumonia." His voice grew distant. "Buried her that spring." "I'm so sorry," Hannah said quietly. Hank nodded his acknowledgement. "Lost the ranch not long after. Turns out I wasn't much good at running it without her." He stood, stretching his tall frame. "That's enough of my sad tale. Dawn's coming soon. I need to scout the area, make sure Blackstone's men aren't nearby." As Hank prepared to leave, Hannah felt a surge of panic. "Will you come back?" He paused at the door, surprised by her question. "Course I will. Not the type to leave a lady in distress." He tipped his hat and slipped out into the pre-dawn light. Left alone, Hannah explored the cabin more thoroughly. It was sparsely furnished but had the essentials. She found some coffee and set about making breakfast, grateful to have a task to occupy her mind. As she worked, she pondered her situation. She had no money, no possessions beyond the clothes she wore. Her trunk had been left behind in Pine Ridge when she fled Blackstone's establishment. And now she was dependent on the kindness of a kind stranger, certainly, but a man she knew almost nothing about. Hank returned an hour later, his expression grim. "Blackstone's men are searching the area. Saw them questioning folks at the trading post about 5 miles east." Hannah's hands trembled as she poured coffee into a tin cup. "Will they come here, eventually? This place isn't exactly hidden." Hank accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. "We need to move you somewhere safer. There's a settlement about 30 miles north. Got a sheriff who doesn't take kindly to Blackstone's type." 30 miles, Hannah repeated, dismayed. "On foot. I've got 2 horses out back. Can you ride?" Hannah shook her head. "I'm from Boston, Mr. Keller. The closest I've come to riding is a carriage in the park." For the first time, Hank smiled fully, transforming his solemn face. "Well then, Miss Winters from Boston, you're about to get your first riding lesson." After a hasty breakfast, Hank brought around 2 horses, a sturdy bay gelding and a smaller, gentler-looking chestnut mare. He helped Hannah mount, patiently showing her how to hold the reins and sit properly. "Just relax and move with her," he advised. "Cinnamon here is gentle as they come." Hannah nodded nervously, gripping the saddle horn so tightly her knuckles turned white. As they set off, she felt unsteady and terrified of falling, but Hank stayed close, offering encouragement. "That's it. You're doing fine." They rode north, keeping to less traveled paths and wooded areas when possible. Hannah's muscles soon ached from the unfamiliar exercise, but she didn't complain. Every mile put more distance between her and Blackstone. Around midday, they stopped by a stream to rest the horses and eat some of the provisions Hank had packed: jerky, hardtack, and dried apples. "How far have we come?" Hannah asked, stretching her sore legs. About 15 miles. You're doing well for a first-time rider. Hannah smiled at the praise, then sobered. Mr. Keller, Hank, he interrupted. Out here folks use first names. Hank, she amended. You're risking a lot to help me. Blackstone seems like a dangerous man to cross. Hank's expression hardened. Blackstone and I have unfinished business anyway, been tracking him for months. Hannah frowned. What kind of business? Hank hesitated, then seemed to decide she deserved the truth. Remember I told you I lost my ranch after Martha died. What I didn't say was how. Blackstone wanted that land, it controlled access to the river. When I wouldn't sell, his men burned me out. Hannah gasped. That's terrible. Did you report it to the authorities? Hank laughed without humor. The sheriff in Pine Ridge, he's in Blackstone's pocket. No, out here justice often has to come from elsewhere. Hannah studied him with new understanding. You're not just helping me, you're using this as a way to get to Blackstone. Hank didn't deny it. Let's just say our interests align for now. The revelation made Hannah uneasy, but before she could respond, the distant sound of hoofbeats reached them. Hank tensed, drawing his revolver. Stay here, he whispered, moving toward the trees for a better view. Hannah held her breath, heart pounding as Hank disappeared from sight. Long minutes passed before he returned, holstering his weapon. Hunters, not Blackstone's men, but we should move on. We're still too close to Pine Ridge. They continued their journey, the terrain growing more rugged as they traveled north. Hannah found herself studying Hank as they rode the straight line of his back, the confident way he handled his horse, the watchful alertness in his posture. Despite his admission about Blackstone, she felt safe with him. There was something honorable about him, a man of principle who had suffered injustice but hadn't let it destroy his basic decency. As the sun began to set, Hank led them to a small abandoned trapper's cabin nestled in a grove of pines. Not as comfortable as my place, but it'll do for the night, he said, helping Hannah dismount. Her legs nearly buckled when they touched the ground, and Hank caught her arm to steady her. Sore, I reckon. I didn't know it was possible to hurt in so many places at once, Hannah admitted with a rueful smile. Hank chuckled. You'll toughen up. Everyone does out here. Inside, the cabin was dusty and bare except for a crude table and a platform that had once been a bed. Hank quickly got a fire going in the stone fireplace while Hannah unpacked their meager supplies. I'll take first watch, Hank said as they finished a simple supper of beans and coffee. You should rest. Hannah didn't argue this time. She was exhausted from the day's ride. Using her saddle as a pillow and wrapped in a blanket Hank provided, she lay down on the platform bed, watching as Hank positioned himself by the door, rifle at the ready. Thank you, she said softly. For everything. Hank nodded, his face half illuminated by the fire's glow. Get some sleep, Hannah. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and something about the way he said it made her heart flutter strangely. She closed her eyes, too tired to examine the feeling further. She woke in the deep of night to find Hank still at his post, silhouetted against the moonlight filtering through the cabin's single window. You should have woken me for my turn to watch, she said, sitting up. Wouldn't have been right to disturb you. Besides, I'm used to long nights. Hannah moved to sit beside him, wincing at her stiff muscles. Tell me more about your wife, Martha, if you don't mind talking about her. Hank was quiet so long Hannah thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, softly, he began to speak. Martha was a schoolteacher before we married. Came west from Philadelphia to teach at the settlement school, smart as they come and kind. A smile touched his lips. Had this way of looking at a person that made them want to be better than they were. We had 3 good years together. Did you have children? Hannah asked gently. Hank shook his head. We were hoping, but it wasn't to be. Hannah felt an ache in her heart for this man and the life he'd lost. And after, you've been alone since then, been moving around mostly, taking work where I can find it. He looked at her. What about you? No young man waiting in Boston, Hannah smiled sadly. There was someone once. John Harrington, son of my father's business associate. We were close. But when my parents died and the business failed, the Harringtons made it clear I was no longer a suitable match. Sounds like you had a lucky escape from that family, Hank observed. I suppose I did. Hannah pulled her blanket tighter around her shoulders. Still, it's what led me to answer that advertisement, to end up in this mess. Life has strange turns, Hank agreed. Sometimes what seems like the worst thing can lead to something unexpected. Their eyes met in the darkness, and Hannah felt a curious warmth spread through her despite the chilly night air. There was something about Hank Keller, his quiet strength, his simple kindness that touched her deeply. The moment was broken by the distant howl of a wolf. Hank stood, instantly alert. "Get some more rest," he said. "Dawn's still a few hours off, and we've got more riding ahead." Hannah returned to her makeshift bed, but sleep eluded her. She lay awake, thinking about Hank, a man who had lost everything but still found it in himself to help a stranger. She wondered what would happen once they reached the settlement. Would he simply leave her there and continue his pursuit of Blackstone? The thought troubled her more than she cared to admit. At first light, they set out again. The day was clear but cool, with a breeze that carried the scent of pine and sage. Hannah found riding easier today, her body beginning to adapt to the rhythm of the horse's gait. "You're a natural," Hank commented when they stopped to water the horses at a small creek. Hannah laughed. "Hardly, but I'm trying. That's all anyone can do." Hank surveyed the surrounding landscape, his expression turning serious. "We should reach Cedar Creek by nightfall. Sheriff, there is an old army friend of mine, he'll help." "And then?" Hannah asked, trying to keep her tone casual. Hank looked at her, seeming to understand her unspoken question. "Then you'll be safe, can start figuring out what comes next for you." "What about Blackstone?" Hank's jaw tightened. "That's my concern, not yours. You plan to kill him," Hannah said, not a question but a statement. "I plan to see justice done," Hank replied evenly. "One way or another." Hannah moved closer to him. "Hank, revenge won't bring Martha back or restore your ranch." "This isn't about revenge," he insisted. "It's about stopping him before he hurts anyone else, before he does to another woman what he tried to do to you." Hannah wanted to argue further but recognized the resolve in his eyes. This was a mission he had set for himself long before meeting her. Instead, she changed the subject. "Tell me about Cedar Creek. What's it like?" Hank seemed grateful for the shift in conversation. "Small but growing. Got a general store, a church, even a schoolhouse now. Good people mostly, hard-working." "Sounds nice," Hannah said thoughtfully. "Could be a place for a fresh start," Hank suggested, watching her face. "Town's growing. Could use a good seamstress." The idea took root in Hannah's mind as they continued riding, a small frontier town far from Boston's memories and Blackstone's reach. Perhaps there, she could build the new life she had been seeking when she answered that fateful advertisement. They rode steadily through the afternoon, the terrain gradually changing from rugged hills to more open country. Hannah was admiring the vista of mountains in the distance when Hank suddenly raised his hand, signaling her to stop. "What is it?" she whispered, fear clutching at her heart. Hank pointed to a plume of dust on the horizon behind them. "Riders, moving fast." Hannah's mouth went dry. "Blackstone's men, can't tell yet, but we should assume so." Hank scanned the surrounding landscape, quickly making a decision. "There's a canyon about a mile ahead. Might lose them there." They urged their horses to a faster pace, Hannah clinging to her saddle as Cinnamon broke into a canter. The dust cloud behind them grew larger. Whoever was following was gaining ground. They reached the canyon entrance, a narrow gap between towering rock walls. Hank led them into the shadowy passage, the sound of their horses' hooves echoing off the stone. "Stay close," he warned as the path twisted and narrowed. The canyon was a maze of passages and dead ends, but Hank navigated with confidence, taking turns that seemed to follow no logical pattern. Hannah trusted him completely, focusing only on staying on her horse as they traversed the increasingly difficult terrain. Finally, they emerged into a small hidden valley, enclosed on three sides by the canyon walls. "We'll wait here," Hank said, dismounting and helping Hannah down. "If they followed us in, they'll likely get lost in there. These canyons are tricky if you don't know them." They led the horses to a small spring and let them drink while keeping watch on the canyon entrance. Minutes stretched into an hour with no sign of pursuit. "I think we lost them," Hannah said hopefully. Hank nodded, but his expression remained vigilant. "Maybe, but Blackstone's not one to give up easy. He's got too much pride for that." As the sun began to set, Painting the canyon walls in hues of gold and crimson, Hank built a small, nearly smokeless fire using dry sage. They ate a quiet meal, both lost in their own thoughts. "We should reach Cedar Creek by mid-morning tomorrow," Hank said finally, breaking the silence. "Once we're there, you'll need to decide what you want to do." Hannah looked up at him. "And you, what will you do?" "Finish what I started," he said simply. Hannah felt a surge of emotion, fear for him, admiration, and something deeper she wasn't ready to name. Hank, a gunshot cracked through the evening air, the bullet splintering a rock near Hank's head. In an instant, he had tackled Hannah to the ground, covering her body with his own as more shots followed. "Stay down," he ordered, drawing his revolver. He fired back in the direction of the shots, then pulled Hannah behind a large boulder. "How did they find us?" Hannah gasped, trembling with fear. "Must have tracked us to the canyon and waited to see where we'd come out." Hank peered around the boulder, then ducked back as another volley of shots rang out. "I count 3 of them. Same ones that were after your stagecoach, I reckon." Hannah's mind raced. "What do we do?" Hank checked his ammunition. "They've got us pinned down." "Can't make a run for the horses without getting shot," he thought for a moment. "I'll draw their fire. When I do, you slip around to those rocks there," he pointed to a formation about 20 yards away, "and keep going toward the horses. Get to Cedar Creek. Ask for Sheriff Dawson." Hannah seized his arm. "No, I won't leave you." Hank's eyes softened as he looked at her. "Hannah, there's no time to argue. This is your chance to get away." "I'm not leaving you to face them alone," she insisted. "There must be another way." Hank studied her determined face, then nodded reluctantly. "All right. New plan, we wait for darkness. It'll be harder for them to keep us pinned down, then we both make for the horses." It was a tense wait as daylight faded. The gunmen continued to fire occasionally, keeping them trapped behind the boulder. Hannah was acutely aware of Hank beside her, his arm pressed against hers in the confined space, his breathing steady despite the danger. "Tell me something," Hank said softly during a lull in the shooting. "If you make it to Cedar Creek, what then? What do you want for your life?" Hannah was surprised by the question in such circumstances, but answered honestly. "Safety first, then, a home, I suppose, work that matters, people to care for." She glanced at him. "The simple things that make a life worth living." Hank nodded, as if confirming something to himself. "Good answer." As full darkness descended, the shooting stopped. Hank waited, listening intently. "They're moving," he whispered. "Trying to circle around, now's our chance." He took Hannah's hand. "Stay low, move fast, don't stop for anything." Together they crept from behind the boulder, keeping to the shadows as they made their way toward where they'd left the horses. They had almost reached them when a shout went up. "There they are!" Gunfire erupted again. Hank pushed Hannah toward the horses. "Go, get on Cinnamon." Hannah scrambled onto her mare while Hank returned fire, providing cover. She saw him run toward his gelding, then stumble as a bullet found its mark. He fell to one knee, clutching his side. "Hank!" Hannah screamed, starting to dismount. "Stay on that horse," Hank commanded through gritted teeth. He staggered to his feet and managed to pull himself into his saddle. "Ride now." They galloped out of the valley, bullets whistling past them. Once clear of the canyon, Hank led them off the trail into dense forest where the pursuers' horses would have trouble following in the dark. After riding hard for nearly an hour, Hank finally signaled a halt. He slid from his saddle, his face pale in the moonlight. "Let me see," Hannah said, rushing to his side. She gasped when she saw the blood soaking his shirt. "You need a doctor." "Just a graze," Hank insisted, though his grimace belied his words. "Need to bind it, that's all." Hannah helped him to a fallen log and tore strips from her petticoat to create a bandage. As she worked, her hands gentle but efficient, she fought back tears. "You saved my life." "Again," she said quietly. "You're worth saving," Hank replied, his voice rough with pain. Hannah looked up, meeting his gaze. In that moment, something passed between them, an understanding, a connection deeper than words could express. "We need to keep moving," Hank said after Hannah finished bandaging his wound. "Those men won't give up, especially now that they've drawn blood." "But you're injured." "I've had worse," he assured her, though Hannah wasn't convinced. Nevertheless, they mounted up and continued north, moving at a slower pace to spare Hank's injury. The night grew colder, and Hannah worried as Hank's posture in the saddle became increasingly slumped. Finally, she insisted they stop at a small shelter formed by an overhanging cliff. Just for a few hours, she pleaded. You need rest. Too weak to argue, Hank agreed. Hannah built a small fire, then checked his wound. The bleeding had slowed but not stopped entirely, and she feared infection. Tell me about Cedar Creek again, she said, trying to keep him talking as she redressed the injury. What's the sheriff like, this friend of yours? Hank smiled faintly. Dawson, ornery as they come, but fair, fought beside him at Shiloh. He winced as Hannah tightened the bandage. Town's got a doctor too, old fellow named Mitchell, good with bullets. That's reassuring, Hannah said with a worried smile. We'll get you to him first thing. Hank caught her hand. Hannah, if something happens— Nothing's going to happen, she interrupted firmly. I won't allow it. He chuckled weakly. Stubborn woman. Yes, well, you'll just have to get used to it, she retorted, then blushed at the implication of her words. Hank's eyes held hers for a long moment. I think I could, he said softly. Hannah's heart skipped a beat. She wanted to say more, to explore this fragile new feeling between them, but Hank's eyes were closing, exhaustion and blood loss taking their toll. Rest, she whispered, laying a hand on his forehead. I'll keep watch. For the first time, their roles were reversed. Hannah sat vigilant by the fire, rifle across her lap as Hank had done that first night in his cabin. She listened intently for any sound that might signal the return of Blackstone's men, all while keeping a watchful eye on Hank's fitful sleep. As dawn approached, Hannah grew increasingly concerned. Hank's forehead felt hot to the touch. Fever was setting in. They needed to reach Cedar Creek soon. She gently woke him as the first light of day filtered through the trees. Hank, we need to go. Can you ride? He nodded grimly, his face drawn with pain. Help me up. Getting him onto his horse was a struggle, but somehow they managed it. Hannah mounted Cinnamon, then took the reins of Hank's gelding as well. Just stay in the saddle, she told him. I'll lead the way. How far to Cedar Creek from here? Northwest, Hank mumbled, pointing vaguely. Follow the creek, maybe 10 miles. Hannah set off, praying she was heading in the right direction. She kept the pace steady but not too fast, constantly glancing back to check on Hank. His head drooped lower with each passing mile. The terrain gradually opened up into rolling plains, and Hannah spotted smoke rising in the distance. A settlement. She urged the horses faster, hope rising in her chest. They were within sight of the first buildings when Hank slumped forward, nearly falling from his saddle. Hannah pulled both horses to a halt and called out desperately for help. Several men came running, and Hannah quickly explained the situation. They carried Hank to the doctor's house while someone went to fetch Sheriff Dawson. The doctor, a gruff elderly man with spectacles and a shock of white hair, immediately set to work, examining Hank's wound while Hannah hovered anxiously nearby. Bullets still in there, Dr. Mitchell announced. Need to get it out before infection gets worse. You his wife. No, Hannah began, then stopped. We're traveling together. The doctor gave her a shrewd look but didn't press the issue. Well, whoever you are, you can make yourself useful. Help me get these clothes off him and boil some water. Hannah assisted as the doctor prepared to remove the bullet, trying to focus on the tasks at hand rather than her fear for Hank. She had just finished heating water when the door opened, and a tall man with a silver star pinned to his vest entered. I'm Sheriff Dawson. Heard someone brought in a wounded man. His eyes fell on Hank and his weathered face registered shock. Good Lord Keller, what happened to him? Blackstone's men, Hannah explained quickly. They've been pursuing us since Pine Ridge. Dawson's expression darkened. Blackstone should have known. He turned to Hannah. And you are Hannah Winters. I was, she hesitated, then decided on the simple truth. A mail-order bride who discovered too late what kind of man Jeremiah Blackstone really is. Hank saved me. Understanding dawned in the sheriff's eyes. That sounds like Keller. Always did have more courage than sense. He glanced at the doctor, who was preparing his instruments. He going to make it, Doc, if infection doesn't set in. Bullet missed anything vital, but he's lost a lot of blood. Mitchell looked up at Hannah. Going to need your help. Can you manage it? Hannah squared her shoulders. Yes, tell me what to do. The next hour was the most harrowing of Hannah's life as she assisted Dr. Mitchell in removing the bullet and cleaning the wound. Hank remained mercifully unconscious throughout the procedure, spared the worst of the pain. When it was finally done, the doctor pronounced himself cautiously optimistic. Keep the wound clean, change the bandages regularly. Rest and good food will do the rest. He's strong, that's in his favor. Sheriff Dawson, who had waited patiently, now addressed Hannah. Miss Winters, I need to know everything about this situation. Blackstone's men may still be tracking you. Hannah told him the whole story from the deceptive letters to her horrifying discovery upon arrival in Pine Ridge, to Hank's rescue and their subsequent flight. The sheriff listened gravely, occasionally making notes. Blackstone's been a thorn in my side for years, he said when she finished. Operates just outside my jurisdiction, but his poison spreads. Been trying to build a case against him, but witnesses have a way of disappearing. He studied Hannah thoughtfully. Your testimony could help change that, Hannah straightened. I'll testify to anything that might help stop him. Dawson nodded approvingly. Good, but first we need to make sure you're safe. I'll post deputies around the Doc's place, but we should move Keller when he's stable enough. Harder to find you if you're not where they'd expect. Where would we go? Hannah asked. I've got a place in mind. Widow Bradley's farm, just outside town. She's got a spare room and could use the help. She'll take you both in, no questions asked. Hannah glanced at Hank's still form on the examining table. When can we move him? Tomorrow, if his fever doesn't worsen, Dr. Mitchell said. Meanwhile, you should get some rest yourself, young lady. There's a cot in the back room. Hannah was reluctant to leave Hank's side, but exhaustion was catching up with her. She agreed to lie down for a while, making the doctor promise to wake her if there was any change in Hank's condition. As she settled onto the narrow cot, the events of the past days washed over her. How strange that, in fleeing one disastrous marriage arrangement, she had found herself drawn to a man so different from what she had imagined for herself. Hank Keller was nothing like the proper Bostonians she had known. He was rough-hewn, scarred by life and war, a man of few words but decisive actions. Yet in his quiet strength and unwavering integrity, she had found something rare and precious. Please, she whispered into the stillness, unsure if she was praying or simply voicing her deepest wish, please let him live. Hannah woke to sunlight streaming through the small window and the smell of coffee. She sat up, momentarily disoriented, then remembered where she was. She quickly made her way back to the main room where she had left Hank. He was awake, propped up slightly with pillows, his face pale but his eyes clear as he spoke quietly with Sheriff Dawson. Both men looked up as she entered. Well, look who's finally awake, the sheriff said with a smile. Keller here was just asking about you. Hannah moved swiftly to Hank's side. How are you feeling? Like I've been kicked by a mule, Hank admitted with a weak smile. But the doc says I'll live thanks to your nursing. Relief washed over Hannah. She impulsively took his hand, forgetting the sheriff's presence. You had me worried. Hank's fingers tightened around hers. Takes more than one of Blackstone's bullets to finish me. Sheriff Dawson cleared his throat, reminding them they weren't alone. I was just telling Keller my plan to move you both to the Bradley farm. Doc says he can be transported by wagon this afternoon if we're careful. Is it safe? Hannah asked. What if Blackstone's men tracked us to Cedar Creek? They probably have, Dawson acknowledged. But they won't know where to look. I'll spread word that Keller's being treated at the doctor's, then move you quietly. Should buy us some time. The plan was set in motion that afternoon, while the town buzzed with news of the wounded stranger at Dr. Mitchell's. Hannah and Hank were discreetly moved to a small wagon with a canvas cover. Sheriff Dawson himself drove them to the Bradley farm, taking a circuitous route to avoid being followed. Widow Bradley turned out to be a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a practical manner. She showed them to a small but clean bedroom off the kitchen. You'll be safe here, she assured them. My son Jacob works the farm with me, good with a rifle, that boy, and keeps to himself, won't ask questions. Hannah was grateful for the woman's discretion. Whatever she might have assumed about their relationship, she didn't judge or pry. The days that followed took on a rhythm of their own. Hannah helped Mrs. Bradley with household chores and tending to Hank, whose strength returned slowly but steadily. Each day, she changed his bandages, helped him take short walks around the room, and read to him from Mrs. Bradley's small collection of books. During those quiet hours together, they talked more freely than they had on the trail. Hank told Hannah about his childhood in Kentucky, his experiences during the war, and the years afterward when he drifted west, looking for a place to belong. Hannah shared stories of her life in Boston, her parents, her work as a seamstress, her dreams of someday having a family of her own. "You could still have that," Hank said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. He was well enough now to move around the house, though still weak from his ordeal. "Have what?" Hannah asked. "A family, a home, all those things you wanted when you came west." Hannah looked at him thoughtfully. "I suppose I could, though not quite the way I'd imagined." "How had you imagined it?" She smiled ruefully. "I had this picture in my head, a prosperous ranch, children running about, a respectable husband who needed a helpmate." She shook her head. "Foolish dreams." "Not foolish," Hank said quietly, "just maybe with the wrong man." Their eyes met, and Hannah felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. Before either could speak further, Mrs. Bradley appeared with coffee, breaking the moment. "Sheriff's coming up the drive," she announced. Dawson brought news both good and concerning. Telegraph came in from the marshal in Cheyenne. "They've been building a case against Blackstone for months. Your testimony would be the final piece they need, Miss Winters." "I'll do it," Hannah said immediately. "That's the good part," Dawson continued. "The concerning part is that Blackstone's men were spotted in town yesterday, asking questions. They haven't found this place yet, but it's only a matter of time." Hank straightened, wincing slightly at the movement. "Then we need to move again." "No," Hannah protested. "You're not strong enough yet." "She's right," the sheriff agreed. "Another week at least before you should travel. But Miss Winters could come to town, stay at my sister's boarding house, be safer there with my deputies keeping watch." "I'm not leaving Hank," Hannah said firmly. Hank looked at her, his expression a mixture of exasperation and something warmer. "Hannah, be reasonable. If Blackstone's men find this place, then we'll face them together," she insisted. "I'm tired of running. Besides, Mrs. Bradley and Jacob would be in danger too if they came here. I won't abandon them or you." Sheriff Dawson sighed. "She's got a point about the Bradleys. All right, new plan. I'll send 2 deputies out here discreetly. They can help keep watch." He looked at Hank. "And I'll bring you a better rifle than that old thing you've been carrying." After the sheriff left, Hannah found Hank on the porch again, staring out at the darkening fields with a troubled expression. "You're angry with me," she said, sitting beside him. "Not angry, worried." He turned to face her. "Hannah, you don't understand what Blackstone is capable of. I've seen it firsthand." "I do understand," she countered. "He tried to force me into his brothel, remember? His men killed that stagecoach driver without hesitation, but I won't let fear rule my life anymore. And I won't let you face this alone." Hank studied her for a long moment. "You've changed since that day I found you in the overturned coach." "Of course I have. The West changes people. You taught me that." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I suppose I did." They sat in companionable silence as night fell fully, the first stars appearing in the vast Montana sky. Hannah felt a sense of peace despite the danger that loomed. Whatever happened, she knew with certainty that her decision to stay was the right one. The next few days passed in a state of heightened vigilance. The 2 deputies Sheriff Dawson had promised arrived and took up positions around the farm. Jacob Bradley, a taciturn young man of about 20, proved to be an excellent scout, riding the perimeter of the property several times daily to check for any sign of intruders. Hank grew stronger with each passing day. The color returned to his face, and he was able to walk further without tiring. Hannah watched his progress with relief, but also a growing awareness that soon he would be well enough to leave to continue his mission against Blackstone. One afternoon, while Mrs. Bradley was in town and the deputies were patrolling the far reaches of the property, Hannah found Hank in the barn examining his saddle. "Planning a trip?" she asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. Hank looked up, caught. "Just checking the gear, been sitting too long." Hannah crossed her arms. "You're going after Blackstone again, aren't you, as soon as you're strong enough?" Hank sighed, setting down the saddle strap he'd been inspecting. "Hannah, we've been through this. Blackstone has to be stopped. By killing him. Is that really the answer?" She moved closer. The law is building a case. With my testimony, cases fall apart, witnesses disappear, evidence gets lost. Hank's jaw tightened. I can't take that chance, not with him. Hannah reached out, placing her hand on his arm. Hank, please, there's been enough violence. I don't want to see you become like him, consumed by vengeance. Hank's expression softened as he looked down at her hand on his arm, then up at her face. It's not just about vengeance anymore, he admitted quietly. It's about protecting what matters. And what matters to you, Hank Keller? Hannah asked, her heart beating faster. Before he could answer, they heard the thunder of approaching hooves. Jacob burst into the barn, rifle in hand. Riders coming, 6, maybe 7 men, armed. His young face was grim. Deputies are too far out to help in time. Hank immediately took charge. Get your mother, take her to the storm cellar. Hannah, I'm staying with you, she said, her tone brooking no argument. Hank assessed her determination and nodded curtly. Then get inside the house. Find Mrs. Bradley's shotgun. I know she keeps one. As Jacob raced to find his mother, Hannah and Hank hurried to the farmhouse. Hank positioned himself at a window with a clear view of the approaching riders, his rifle at the ready. Hannah found the shotgun in a cabinet and loaded it with hands that trembled but didn't falter. They'll be here in minutes, Hank said, his voice tense. Stay back from the windows. If anything happens to me, get to the cellar with the Bradleys. Hannah took her position at another window, the weight of the shotgun unfamiliar but reassuring in her hands. Nothing's going to happen to you. Not if I can help it. The riders came into full view, rough-looking men, heavily armed, led by a figure Hannah recognized with a chill. Jeremiah Blackstone himself, a tall man with a neat beard and cold eyes, dressed like a prosperous businessman rather than the predator he was. They halted in the farmyard and Blackstone called out, Keller, I know you're in there, bring out the girl and maybe I'll let you live. Hank didn't respond, just sighted down his rifle. You're outnumbered, Keller, Blackstone continued. Be reasonable. The woman belongs to me, legal contract and all. At this, Hannah couldn't stay silent. There was no legal contract, she shouted. Only lies and deception, Blackstone laughed. Ah, there she is, Miss Winters, you're causing me a great deal of trouble. Come out now and your cowboy friend won't have to die. He's stalling, Hank murmured to Hannah. Trying to keep us talking while his men get into position. He raised his voice. Blackstone, there are deputies on their way. Best ride out while you can, deputies, Blackstone scoffed. Your friend Dawson and his men are busy with a disturbance in town. Very convenient, wouldn't you say? He signaled to his men, who began to spread out surrounding the house. Last chance, Keller. Hank's expression hardened. Hannah, get down. The first shots shattered the window above Hannah's head. She ducked, heart pounding, then steadied herself and fired the shotgun through the broken glass. One of Blackstone's men cried out and fell from his horse. The gunfight erupted in earnest then. Hank moved from window to window, firing with deadly accuracy. Hannah reloaded the shotgun with cartridges from Mrs. Bradley's cabinet, firing whenever she had a clear shot. They're trying to reach the back door, Hank warned, spotting 2 men creeping around the side of the house. Hannah ran to the kitchen, arriving just as the door burst open. She fired without hesitation, the shotgun's blast throwing one man backward. The other ducked away, returning fire wildly. Hannah took cover behind the heavy oak table, which she and Hank had tipped onto its side earlier as a barricade. The exchange of gunfire continued, the house's walls splintering with bullets. Hannah could hear Hank in the front room, still firing steadily. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled the air. A moment of relative quiet fell. Hannah cautiously peered around the table to see if the man at the back door was still there. A movement caught her eye not at the door, but at the window. Another of Blackstone's men was attempting to climb through. Hannah raised the shotgun, but it clicked empty. In desperation, she seized a heavy iron skillet from the stove and swung with all her might as the man came through the window. The pan connected with a satisfying thunk, and the intruder crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Hank. She called, breathless. Are you all right? Still here, he responded from the front room. 3 down by my count. How many your way? 2, Hannah replied, quickly reloading the shotgun. That leaves Blackstone and 1 other. As if summoned by his name, Blackstone's voice rang out again. Enough of this, Keller, look what I've found. Hannah moved to join Hank at the front window and felt her blood run cold. Blackstone stood in the yard, holding Mrs. Bradley by the arm, a pistol to her head. The older woman's face was terrified but defiant. Let her go, Blackstone, Hank called. She's got nothing to do with this. Oh, but she does, Blackstone replied smoothly. She harbored fugitives. That makes her complicit. He pressed the gun harder against Mrs. Bradley's temple. Come out now, both of you, or the widow dies. Hannah saw the anguish on Hank's face, knew he was calculating whether he could make the shot without endangering Mrs. Bradley. The odds weren't good. I'll go, Hannah said quietly. No, Hank growled. That's exactly what he wants. We can't let him kill her, Hannah insisted. Besides, the deputies will be here soon. We just need to buy time. Before Hank could stop her, Hannah called out, Let her go, Blackstone, and I'll come out. Hannah, don't, Hank began, but she silenced him with a look. I have a plan, she whispered. Trust me. Something in her expression must have convinced him, for he reluctantly nodded. I'll cover you. Hannah set down the shotgun and moved to the door. Taking a deep breath, she stepped onto the porch, hands raised. There you are, Blackstone said with a cold smile. Come closer, my dear. Hannah descended the steps slowly, her mind racing. Where was Jacob? Had he managed to get away and alert the deputies? And where was Blackstone's last man? As she reached the yard, Blackstone shoved Mrs. Bradley roughly aside and trained his gun on Hannah. Now, where's Keller? Right here, Hank's voice came from the porch. He stood in the doorway, rifle aimed squarely at Blackstone. Ah, the gallant cowboy, Blackstone sneered, still protecting what isn't yours. Let the women go, Blackstone. This is between you and me, Blackstone laughed. You know, Keller, you've been a thorn in my side for too long. First your ranch, now this girl. When will you learn to stop interfering in my business? When you're 6 feet under, Hank replied coldly. Hannah had been edging closer to Mrs. Bradley, who had stumbled to her knees when Blackstone pushed her. As the men faced off, Hannah helped the older woman to her feet. Run for the barn when I say, she whispered. Mrs. Bradley nodded almost imperceptibly, her eyes darting to something behind the house. Hannah followed her gaze and saw a shadow moving stealthily along the wall. Blackstone's final man, trying to flank Hank. Hank, behind you, Hannah screamed, just as the man raised his gun. Everything happened at once. Hank spun, firing at the would-be ambusher. Blackstone seized the distraction to aim at Hank. Hannah, acting purely on instinct, threw herself at Blackstone, knocking his arm upward as he fired. The bullet went wild. Run, Hannah shouted to Mrs. Bradley, who fled toward the barn. Blackstone struck Hannah across the face, sending her sprawling. He aimed his gun at her, rage contorting his features. You'll regret that, a shot rang out, and Blackstone staggered backward, a look of surprise on his face. He touched his chest, his fingers coming away red, then collapsed to the ground. Hannah looked up to see Hank on the porch, his rifle still raised, his face a mask of grim satisfaction. Hannah, he rushed to her side, helping her to her feet. Are you hurt? She shook her head, though her cheek stung where Blackstone had hit her. Is he? Hank glanced at Blackstone's still form. Yes, a strange mixture of relief and regret washed over Hannah. While she couldn't mourn the man who had caused so much suffering, the violence of his end still affected her. The sound of galloping horses drew their attention. Hannah tensed, fearing more of Blackstone's men, but it was Sheriff Dawson and his deputies, accompanied by Jacob Bradley. Looks like we missed the party, Dawson said grimly, surveying the scene. Everyone all right. We're alive, Hank confirmed, his arm still protectively around Hannah's shoulders. Mrs. Bradley, here, the widow called, emerging cautiously from the barn. I'm unharmed, thanks to Miss Winters and Mr. Keller. Sheriff Dawson dismounted, checking Blackstone's body and those of his fallen men. 2 were dead, including Blackstone. The others were wounded or, in the case of the man Hannah had hit with the skillet, unconscious. You two have some explaining to do, the sheriff said, though his tone held more approval than censure. But it can wait till we get these men sorted out. The aftermath of the gunfight was a blur of activity. Deputies tended to the wounded and secured the prisoners. Dr. Mitchell was summoned to treat injuries, including a graze on Hank's arm that he hadn't even noticed in the heat of battle. Mrs. Bradley, remarkably composed given her ordeal, made coffee for everyone while giving her statement to Sheriff Dawson. Hannah sat quietly on the porch steps, trying to process everything that had happened. She had come west seeking security and a new beginning, only to find herself in the middle of violence and danger. Yet strangely, she felt no regret. The woman who had left Boston would never have been able to stand her ground in a gunfight or strike down an attacker with a skillet. She had changed, become stronger, more capable. Hank joined her on the steps after Dr. Mitchell finished bandaging his arm. Neither spoke for a long moment, content to sit in companionable silence as the chaos around them gradually subsided. "It's over," Hank said finally. "Blackstone can't hurt anyone else." Hannah nodded, watching as the deputies loaded the last of the prisoners onto a wagon bound for the Cedar Creek jail. "What happens now?" Hank seemed to understand she wasn't asking about the legal proceedings or immediate future. "That depends. On what? On what you want, Hannah." She turned to look at him, really look at him, this man who had saved her life, who had risked everything to protect her, whose quiet strength and integrity had captured her heart almost without her realizing it. "I want a home," she said softly. "Work that matters, people to care for." She echoed her words from their earlier conversation, then added, "But most of all, I want to be with someone who sees me for who I really am, not just a seamstress from Boston or a mail-order bride, but a woman who can stand on her own yet chooses to stand beside him." Hank's expression softened, a smile reaching his eyes. "I see you, Hannah Winters. I've seen you since that first day." He took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "I'm not a wealthy man. Don't have much to offer except hard work and a promise to always stand beside you no matter what comes." Hannah felt tears prick her eyes, but they were tears of happiness, not sorrow. "That's all I've ever wanted, Hank, not wealth or ease, but a true partnership, a shared life." Hank's smile widened. "Then maybe we should consider making this arrangement permanent, once the dust settles, of course." Hannah laughed, the sound light and free. "Are you proposing to me, Mr. Keller? Reckon I am, Miss Winters, though I'd get down on one knee if my leg wasn't still healing." She squeezed his hand. "I accept, bad leg and all." Their moment was interrupted by Sheriff Dawson clearing his throat nearby. "Hate to break this up, but we're about ready to head back to town. Doc says the farmhouse is too damaged to stay in tonight. Mrs. Bradley and Jacob are coming to my sister's boarding house. You two are welcome as well." Hannah looked questioningly at Hank, who nodded. "That would be fine, Sheriff. Thank you." As they prepared to leave, Hannah took one last look at the farmhouse where so much had changed in such a short time. The bullets had splintered the wooden walls, broken windows, and left scars that would take time to heal, much like the people who had fought there. "We can help Mrs. Bradley rebuild," Hank said, noticing her gaze. "If you'd like." Hannah smiled, taking his arm as they walked to the waiting wagon. "I'd like that very much." 3 months later, on a crisp autumn day, Hannah Winters became Hannah Keller in a simple ceremony at the Cedar Creek church. Mrs. Bradley had insisted on hosting the small reception at her rebuilt farmhouse, now restored and improved with the help of Hank, Jacob, and many townspeople who had rallied around the widow after the gunfight. The story of how Hank and Hannah had stood against Blackstone had spread throughout the territory, turning them into reluctant local heroes. Hannah's testimony, along with evidence gathered from Blackstone's operation after his death, had led to the conviction of several of his associates and the closure of his brothel in Pine Ridge. With the reward money for Blackstone, there had been a bounty on him for previous crimes. Hank and Hannah had purchased a small property on the outskirts of Cedar Creek. It wasn't the grand ranch of Hannah's original dreams, but it was theirs, and they were building it together. Hannah had opened a dressmaking shop in town, her skills as a seamstress quickly earning her a loyal clientele. Hank had taken work as a deputy under Sheriff Dawson while also working their land, finding satisfaction in both roles. As Hannah stood beside her new husband, accepting congratulations from friends and neighbors, she marveled at the twists and turns that had brought her to this moment. The mail-order bride advertisement that had seemed like her salvation had nearly led to her ruin, Yet through that danger, she had found genuine love and a true home. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Keller," Hank murmured, coming to stand beside her with 2 glasses of punch. Hannah smiled, accepting a glass. "I was just thinking how strangely life works out. If I hadn't answered that advertisement, if I hadn't been riding that particular trail that day." Hank continued. "We might never have met," Hannah finished, "and I can't imagine my life without you now." Hank's eyes, warm with love, met hers. "Nor I without you. Turns out guarding your door that first night was the best decision I ever made." Hannah laughed, remembering how he had insisted on keeping watch while she slept. "My cowboy guardian." "Always," he promised, sealing the word with a kiss that held all the hope and promise of their future together. As the celebration continued around them, Hannah felt a deep contentment settle in her heart. She had come west seeking security and found danger instead. She had sought a husband of convenience and found a partner in love. The path had been far from straight or easy, but standing here now, with Hank's hand in hers and their home waiting, she knew with absolute certainty that she had found exactly where she belonged.